The Routledge series emerged at the same time that rural criminology began to emerge. And so the story of the Routledge International Series on Rural Criminology could be traced back to about 10 years ago. I was asked at that time by a representative of Routledge, Tom Sutton, who was very good at promoting a book series for both sales and for its place in the discipline of criminology. So he's very thoughtful about that. And he suggested a handbook in rural criminology. And so I was complimented by that and took on that project and endeavored to make that book as international as possible, not just focused on North America. I partly succeeded and partly failed. But then the success of that book launched the series by Routledge in rural criminology. At this point, we have 3 books published, and they go like this. The first one that launched the series is an edited book by Alistair Harkness on rural crime prevention theory, tactics, and techniques. And so it was the first. It has a number of chapters by scholars from around the world. We followed with a shorter book, but a more focused book by Walter de Kesaretti, a renowned scholar at West Virginia University in a endowed chaired position called the Dean Carlson. He will become an American Society of Criminology Fellow at the 2022 meeting of the American Society of Criminology, and really represents the first rural scholar to achieve that award. His was focused on women abuse in rural places. And what makes this book distinctive is that he took an international approach. It's not just about, as a synthesis, studies from the United States, but attempts to look at the issue across a number of different countries. And he did succeed mostly in doing that, even though the literature about violence against women in rural societies around the world can be quite sparse. So you often are writing based on where most of the literature is coming from, and that tends to be Australia, the United States, Canada, and Great Britain. Nonetheless, he has articles in there from Pakistan, India, and other places, so that it begins to take on a more international focus. And then the most recent one to be published is another edited edition by Ralph Weisheit at Illinois State, Arthur Polotz at Technology University Dublin, and Jessica Peterson, who is now at Southern Oregon University. Arthur and Jessica are both young scholars, whereas Ralph really got this rural criminology development going with a book he published with 2 co-authors in 1996. And that went through 3 editions. It was the first real synthesis of rural criminology. It's called Crime and Policing in Small Town and Rural America. And so we had a roundtable at the ASC meetings, and all 3 editors were there, plus a few other people. And the discussion began to center around the need for chapters that would explain to readers the challenges of conducting rural criminology research. And from that roundtable emerged the idea that the editors would be a combination of older and younger scholars. And so Jessica and Arthur, I think, represent the future, and Ralph represents the first stage of development of rural criminology. So it was a real pleasure for me to be the editor of the series and to be a firsthand witness at that particular roundtable. If you had to write a history of rural criminology, that would be a major event in its short history. There is a fourth one that will be released within the year, and it is a book on rural victims edited by Alistair and Rachel Hale. And again, it has scholars from around the world who are writing about what it means to be a victim in a rural context. We're moving now toward some other topics that will be a possible publication in the Routledge series, depending upon authors, their follow-through and commitment, etc. And those include a variety of issues, including one on rural policing in America. Even though that was covered in the book by Ralph Weishaupt and his associates, the last or third edition of that was in 2006. So if one began to work on a book right now, it would be 20 years later before it was published. And there's so much going on relative to policing and issues in the United States. This is one that we really need to concentrate on. Images of what rural is might be another one, especially as those images relate to how rural is perceived, not only in North America, but also around the world. In criminology, it's going to be a continuous fight to get the mainstream to focus on rural crime as an important topic. It's so urban focused that will be, in essence, a constant battle, despite all of the progress we've made. And so we have a potential scholar to do that. Another one is prisoner reentry, especially rural prisoners, that is, prisoners who have a rural background, and once they are released from prison, will be going back to rural communities. Does rural help with their assimilation back into society and reducing recidivism, or in fact, does it work the other way? That's a third possibility. The fourth one is on a criminology of food and agriculture, starting with farm victimization, and then we'll consider the issue of farmers as the offenders, as the criminals. And there's actually been a great deal of work done on that. And so that book, which is in development, will focus on criminological theory and its relationship to the various studies that have taken place. Probably the most exciting work on farm victimization right now are the African studies. There are a large number of them, and they really illustrate the context in which local food producers are vulnerable to crime, especially trans-border livestock theft, etc. And so there's a very healthy set of literature out there on this particular topic. Meanwhile, farmers as offenders, was pioneered by a scholar in Scotland named Robert Smith, who was looking at rogue farmers and farmers who violate environmental regulations and other things like that. Farmers are part of social class systems in every society. They're landowners, and they are just as susceptible to crime and as susceptible to becoming involved in crime as any other economic sector. And so we will likely have a concentration on that. And finally, I'll mention one more possibility, and that is agricultural slavery. And its modern context, but obviously with links back to the history of slavery in previous centuries. And there are two scholars in England who are seriously thinking about beginning to do work to put together a synthesis of work on this topic. So there's a lot of really significant criminology that can be done in this Rural Criminology series by Routledge. If you want to publish in the series, you got a bright idea that's rural focused, and every criminological topic can have a rural focus, except perhaps for crime in a skyscraper. So contact me. And contact me at my Gmail address, because I'm retired from Ohio State and rarely check my email there. But it is donnermeyer.1@gmail.com. And Donnermeyer is actually quite easy to spell. DONNERMEYER. Contact me and we can talk about what your idea is, if it fits the series, and what the book proposal guidelines look like. Although those are pretty generic, that is straightforward for any particular book company.